I'm very happy to insist, and I'm very happy to be here. So I will talk about the self-portrait as an Ottoman woman, focusing on some of the motivations in making the work and its relationship to the archive as a mode of practice, of contemporary art practice. The project consists of postcards, popular postcards, featuring women in national dresses or traditional costumes, representing the whole of the Ottoman, post-Ottoman landscape, but referencing different ideological and chronological contexts. I will explain the importance of the different ideological contexts throughout the talk. Also, what you see here is 3 out of 12 panels, and I will explain as well during the talk why the 12 panels are important.
I wonder if we should use the mic.
I am using it.
Okay.
I think I am. So should I speak louder?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the work starts with a memory, and I'm going to try not to read too much, but okay, let's see. It starts with a memory. So while I was filming in Yerevan, I found this postcard of the Armenian woman from Negri. And the postcard reminded me not of my Armenian grandma, but actually of the Greek one. And it reminded me of the similar way of dressing, so I started kind of tentatively collecting postcards. The memory does not only relate to the dress, but for me, in retrospect, it represents different type of social-cultural organization, what again, very kind of consciously, I would call it Ottoman subjectivity. So, but I didn't stay with the memory, or at the memory. I started looking at the images of these women in the context of the post-Ottoman landscape. And while building the collection and researching, I started to look at the complex process of production and consumption of such imagery. I have written about this complex process of production and consumption of women's representation, but here I will just very briefly talk, because I will try to focus on the archive. So, in terms of how these postcards were produced, they come from heterogeneous and complex ideological contexts. They are Orientalist images produced by colonial powers. They are nationalist images produced in the nation-building processes that came after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. There are also Ottoman images produced as part of the late Ottoman state and their projection-specific type of modern identity. So, in terms of the critical discussion of this type of postcards, usually the narrative we get is as a kind of post-colonial critique of the Orientalist focus of the imagery. Also, this type of postcards, they have been linked to the development of ethnography and anthropology as a kind of new sciences of modernity, and they are linked, especially in the Middle East, to a specific development of a type of tourist industry, a colonial tourist industry that was also linked to the development of the local photographic studios. In terms of the Ottoman Empire, again, the late Ottoman Empire, again, as I said, there was, and recently this research has started emerging, that the Ottoman state was engaged in a type of used photography as an instrument to project a national, progressive, modern identity. And I think there are going to be talks in the conference next week exploring this issue. However, apart from this kind of complex context, there is evidence that suggests a different play in the production consumption, the consumption of this imagery. For example, I will reference here Rebecca Deru and her research on women from postcards from Algeria. She demonstrated how a large number of erotic postcards of Algerian women was collected by French women that, and which, as Guéraud argues, were assigning to them functions that were not intended by the colonial industries. They were using the postcards, and here I'm quoting, to displace and expand definitions of bourgeois femininity. The relationship of the photographic to this type of practice of masquerade or of hired models of dressing up is also brought up by other researchers in relation to photography in Egypt, for example. So the work, apart from trying to address this complex process in the production and consumption of the imagery, and here you see, for example, you see this is a hired model as a different type of it also tries to, what happens in irrespectively of the complex process of production consumption is that the women at last they become visible. They become visible, but they're not part of the art history. And here I'm referring to the idea of the Ottoman woman. Up until recently, the category of the Ottoman woman as a historical category has not really been addressed to my knowledge, in kind of Turkey's Oriental Ottoman studies. There are various reasons. One is linked to the idea that Turkey as a modern state meant a literal break with the Ottoman past. Women at the Ottoman times, they thought as repressed under Sultanic rule, so there was no time to study them. And also in the nation states, there was no time to study the Ottoman idea of subjectivity because they were so busy trying to be modern and national. And in that process, women and their bodies and their cultures became symbols, instrumentalized actually in the very construction of national narratives. And although we have studies of women, of Ottoman women starting to emerge, they're still very cautiously looking at the lives of these women comparatively. So apart from the complex process of production and consumption of the photographic images and the idea of the Ottoman woman, the work can also be approached as an artistic inquiry into the function of the archive and the role of photography as an instrument of modernity. And here there is a lot of kind of art historical scholarly research, especially I will reference the work of Opry and Renzo, where he very eloquently described how artists have approached the archive both as a form, exploring the way the archive organizes knowledge into representational form, as well as a medium, questioning the legacy of archival truth. And photography is especially implicated in such art practices since as a technology it has been central in the development of the new bureaucratic archives of modernity. However, my relation to the archive in self-portrait as an Ottoman woman is ambivalent and playful. Rejecting archival classifications based on geographical and chronological taxonomies, the project is organized according to the position of the woman in front of the static camera, the direction of their gaze, the types of shots, and the particularities of posture and hand movement. The work does not contain only images of Oriental fantasy, it incorporates images of women, as I said, from Ottoman geography that fall outside the Orientalist discourse. You have the national images, you have images of late Ottoman photography, you have, for example, a Greek woman of Egypt or a Turkish woman of Thessaloniki that as categories problematize national identification. In that sense, the work produces an inappropriate space in its attempt to create precisely in its attempt to create the Ottoman woman as a historical category. In this inappropriate grouping, the women become part of a common visual space which has the potential to disrupt and also conflate the function of Orientalist fantasy and national identification. And in this inappropriate grouping, the women, and I mean, please have in mind the work behind, and not what I'm showing in the slides. The women become part of a new spatial framework arranged into strips of movement that echo Muybridge's early photographic studies of motion. So if you look at the work behind, the women are arranged into strips of motion, which is punctuated by gaps. Thus, and the gaps are important here because in this kind of trying to mimic the idea of a motion strip, the work as a form, as a medium or attribute, the archive, is used in order to highlight its incompleteness. The work in all of its bringing together also reminds us of all that it excludes. It refuses the authority of formulating the Ottoman woman as a historical category. Thus, it refuses, in my view, to produce knowledge that is institutionalized in a way that a historical study of women representation would have done. And the project, it is an inappropriate and incomplete archive which enacts a further displacement by playing with different representational systems. For example, the motion strips, apart from creating an incompleteness, also comment on specific histories of representing movement. So we have a grid-like symmetry and sequencing of the motion study. The strips are arranged into panels where overall movement is created not by homogeneous frames. So if you imagine Muybridge's motion studies, if you have the same background, which is a grid background or a background, and the same person creating movement. Here we have different visual backgrounds, we have different women, different costumes, different postures, trying to create this idea of a motion strip, this idea of movement. So unlike and also in Muybridge's work, there is a kind of a specific gender determination. The women are always either sexualized objects or they're doing domestic activities, while the men do sports. So unlike the determined gender-determined function of Muybridge's work and the ideological role of the postcards which I described previously, this retrospective motion strip, so in my work in a sense, challenge the types of mobility available to women by containing within one panel a diversity and heterogeneity of poses, ideological context, type of dresses, visual backgrounds, social codes, the hired model, the national symbol, the upper class lady. The work also plays with the idea of the grid as a specific representational form linked to explorations of the archive within art practice. So, and it sets the grid in relationship to the motion study. And here, this is why the work consists of 12 panels, and this is why it is important that there are 12 panels, because within the overall work, which are 12 here, is that you have a lot of motion strips creating a larger grid. The grid, why the grid is important? As a form and as a method has been particularly important in conceptual and minimalist practices, often interpreted as a flattening out of time, dematerializing the image and linked to a narrative of objectivity. In the flat, atemporal and spatial grid, there is no room for subjective identification. By inserting the motion study into the grid, the work precisely attempts to redress the violence of the objective by alluding through motion to the idea of narrative, to other types of ideas, narrative, storytelling, dancing. With the creation of movement and its central organizational, as a central organizational principle, the work also formally plays between the motion study, the grid, the archive, with the idea of the self-portrait. That it sets up again a specific type of representational legacy, the motion strip, against the idea of the self-portrait, addressing a collective body and action. And here, it's another reason why 12 is important, or the mass is important, because it alludes to this idea of the rise of a collective mass. The work complicates the indexical power of the photographic, its relationship to portraiture, and the category of the Ottoman woman as a potential space for subjective identification. It also links to specific histories of feminist photographic art practices, which I don't have time to refer, but it alludes to them at least. It is conversing or in conversation with them. So I will conclude here by referencing briefly an how the work links to other types of work produced in the Middle East with, using archives or in the post-Ottoman landscape. So in my view, the recent interest of artists and institutions in preserving, collecting, formulating, and reinterpreting archives is linked to a process that comes out of a post-colonial critique of Orientalist discourses as validating peripheral modernist projects. Peripheral in quotes or alternative. And in my view, there is a danger here, that is a danger of enacting a type of self-orientalization in attempting to insert material from peripheral or alternative modernities and cultural practices into Western art narratives. The motivation behind the self-portrait as an Ottoman woman is rather different. It comes out of a feminist perspective. It's based on creating my own archive out of inappropriate and incomplete material. The investment in studying the context of the production of this material, rather than representing a historical curiosity of my part, it is a gesture of respect in the agency of these women, and also very specific positioning in relation to a global art market where artists are pushed into using histories of local image production as superficial markers of diversity and that ultimately function as methods of self-orientalization. In the lack of critical discourses in the life of these women, I reclaim these representations not only to demonstrate the dominant ideologies inscribed in their bodies, but also in order to claim a shared history, to create a space of belonging, and thus insert my practice with other obscure histories of female cultural production, and link these to new forms of resistance. In turning photographic images of popular culture into new potentialities of movement, the project also attempts to destabilize Western art narratives and technologies of movement. Making the case for an Ottoman woman that reclaims visual space, the work from the position of the female author also reclaims specific visual practices from their own Western history. So it is not only my books that makes motion studies, it's Ekaterina Gigissian that makes retrospective motion studies. Thus, for me, the project is more aligned to a performative and subversive act rather than an archive sensibility.